time at 2 in the
Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mackie on WZZR, broadcasting from Australia. Yes, I'm Australian. For Revolution Radio on, you guessed it, www.revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio. So jump into the chat room if you can. This is show number 398. And if Mackie were sitting here or online, but I'll give you a second to digest this, he would say 8, 90, and 300. It's on air online and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen from anywhere or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. Yeah, sorry about it being late. You know, I didn't have a feed from the bumper, so I have to guess when it is. So sorry about that. And yes, it is shiny, and yes, it is Shiny Side Out with David Mackey. Love our brand. If you missed Solaris's show, she had a round table, and I was catching it while I was making some notes for my show. It was pretty fun. And yes, Amad, it has been a long time since I've been on your show. And the other lady, which I didn't catch her name, I would absolutely be honoured to be on your show to be interviewed. Yes, it is me. Yes, it's local to Kentucky. Now, it only costs $5 a month US to subscribe to the archives, and we suggest and not push. I do it myself. So, you know, I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't do because I already do it, and I subscribe to the archives. So what I can do is because I don't always catch the whole of Solaris' show, so I can download it. I can download mine for safekeeping, but what I can do is I can listen to any host shows on the network, and I can do that in my own time when I prefer to do it. Because you know what? We're busy people. We don't have, tons of free time. You can just do whatever you want. And the tough part is you might love a show that's on a time slot, because I'm in Australia, so I don't get prime time slots. But the thing is, I can't listen to your prime time because I'm at work. So I can do the same thing, or I'm asleep. So what I can do is just download it and listen to it at my leisure. Do the same thing. It's Shiny Side Out. We acknowledge the traditional owners, the custodians of the land, the Dark and Jung, and where Meki lives, it's the Daruk people. And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I add that we should all consider this civilization's footprint, that beneath that footprint are lands which have had stories passed down for 240,000 generations. We're talking nearly 80,000 years. This land that I'm on has had a history of the land passed down, and that is as consistent as you could get. There wasn't a written language in Australia outside of pictorial on cave walls and paintings. They were there for a different reason. There's only one story which is inscribed in the hilltop near Mount Yengo, Yengo, which is just it's very similar to Devil's Tower, though it's covered, it's believed to be more older than Devil's Tower in Wyoming. But where I live here in New South Wales, not like an hour and 40 minutes from me, it's not very far at all. And Mackie and I have been, and it is the site of which Biami, which was a fellow from space, landed. It's the Aboriginal tale of first man, and from his leg is what it means, Biami, from his leg. And it describes from a bone he created the people in Australia. At the time, there weren't people anywhere. Now, it's a very similar story him and his sons, and the return, one died here and the others left with their father. And because he was here and then he stepped to there and stepped again. Now, that story is very similar to the Sumerian tales of the Anunnaki coming down. Hey, SJ. Coming down and creating mankind. Well, the black-headed ones initially, to be honest. And while the Sumerians say the Anunnaki did it, it was truly the Igigi who did it, because that was the people that were the servants of the Anunnaki who complained there was too much labor, not really up into all of this. Hey, Maced 139. Like, we're okay on your spaceship to be your, like, not slaves, but to be your servants. But as far as all this digging and mining and stuff, no, we don't do that, right? I don't do mining. They complained, and this is what it says in the Sumerian text. It says that they complained so much that the Anunnaki said, "Stop your talk and your complaining. We'll make another race of people to do all of that," and that's when they made humans. And they made them in their image, which means basically we're the same looking kind of people as they are, except there was some complexity around that, and we got a little out of hand, and I think at that point we lived forever, and they didn't like that because we got up to mischief because we could live forever, and they wiped us all out, all of those who lived forever, and then they returned us back again with a lifespan of 120-year maximum. Interesting, huh? Because that's what it says in the text. But how could someone that lived back then live to know 120 years was the age maximum you could live, unless it's been described as it was a transcript that they were writing down first hand from someone before they left, because there was a pocket of Anunnaki that were left here just to oversee the extraction of themselves, and those people were the ones who handed this knowledge down, and by doing so they actually were talking directly to scribes who notated basically all of that story. It wasn't a story that was passed down from generation to generation, 600 years of verbal information that could have been tainted. It's been analysed and decided that what they actually did, this is science doing its science, I'm going to make a joke, science. But what happened was they were described as having transcribed it from someone telling them, and that telling them, the person was one of those last project managers who were just there for the cleanup to get them out. Isn't that interesting? Why isn't that being taught? It's always does my head in that we can ignore the true histories, the real history, and it can be fudged and misshapen, intentionally misshapen, into a story about a dude who died on a cross, and we should all respect each other because we were born into sin already. Okay, look, I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying, which would you prefer? Which story do you think would be better? Told the actual history, or one that it seems like every time it was to mention something about Anunnaki, it was, we'll just say God. We'll put God in there somewhere. Anywho, the dog has pushed my door open. Now I can hear everyone in my house, and I hope you can't. Anyway, so look, this week, besides all of the insane fires around the globe, besides those, because fire is fire and it can escalate out of control, thinking a single match could burn down an entire city. So an exothermic reaction is fire, and it can grow larger than its source, as we all know. Imagine if that were true about water, for instance. Imagine you poured yourself a drop of water from a single drop, and before you knew it, you were being overwhelmed by the amount of water. Imagine if there was so much water that you couldn't stop it, that it became uncontrollable, that it flooded your entire nation just because you wanted a drop of water. Well, that's true of fire. Fire can destroy everything unless it's interfered with, runs out of fuel, and as we know, the three things, it's fuel, heat, and oxygen. So if it runs out of any of those, that's the end of that. No more fire. So except for the fires, the air quality, except for discussing with them, I'll tell you, in Tasmania there's some hideous fires that don't even make the news. They're not even on the news, right? The Amazon's still burning, and I was asking someone the other day, what do you think about the Amazon fires still burning? They go, are they? Right? That doesn't make the news. Because it's only the top 5 stories or something, right? That makes the news in your area. And the top 5, no one else could give a toss about the rest of them. That's all there is. So, but there's other stuff going on. So California's up in flames again, right? And I saw the stories about turning the power off to 1 or 2 million people, just whenever they want. So why turn the power off? Now I've heard that is to stop the electrical lines from touching each other in the high winds and causing sparks, which could exacerbate the fires by creating new fires. We saw the same issue occurred in Melbourne during the fires where they went throughout the hills. Terrible thing, and no one took the blame for it. It was just one of those things that started with high winds and then it just got worse. However, having said that, why turn the power off? What, to stop more? Is that really what you're doing? Maybe it interferes with the weapon that they're using to set the fires. I'm just saying. Is it possible? And this is what I raised this week with people on Facebook who hate me even before I start typing. And I'll tell you some good news stories about the things that I've responded to this week. Number one is directed energy weapons. Is it really a thing? It's got to be a thing. I mean, it just has to be. This week showed some research that people had and the military had let out where they, from like a mile away, they melted a car engine block through the side of the car, through the bonnet of the car. I think it was. The car was tilted up, and they fired an energy weapon at it, and it melted the block, the engine block. That's some pretty good power. I mean, the car was set ablaze, and that's not pretty for the car. Do they have directed energy weapons? Absolutely. Have they got patents for them? Completely. Can they do it from space? Not sure. Oh, and the Santa Anas. Yeah, I lived in California, SJ, as you know, and all the listeners would already know. I lived in California during the Santa Anas, and those winds are crazy winds that run parallel to the they run along the depths of the valleys. When the wind is in the right direction, it amplifies the wind, and they get extremely powerful winds through there. So I lived in Anaheim Hills. Riverside was on one side. I loved Tustin Avenue, by the way. Just loved it. So yeah, that was pretty cool. I love SoCal, man. I would live there in a heartbeat. However, all right. So directed energy weapons is since it's a thing, I've already determined that's a thing. The next thing is we have to could they be used from space? Don't know. Possibly. I mean, just a couple of mirrors. Like if you had 100 mirrors that you could reflect the sun's light down onto a single point on the ground, if they were adequately sized, then you're going to have so many times the energy from the sun, and by making anything a certain temperature, it's going to ignite, right? So look, it's completely possible that that's the thing that could be done. If it was a machine in space, like a giant laser, that's also a thing. But to see houses, every other odd house burnt without the trees igniting, that doesn't necessarily mean it's directed energy weapons. Just saying you have an ember storm that is it's not, I shouldn't say downwind, but it's not, certainly not upwind. It's in the direction of the wind from the fire, where embers can travel, miles in advance of the advancing fire, and falling into the gutters of houses or getting blown up under the edge of the eave, under the gutter, under the tile that overlaps onto it, can set fire to a house from the inside. And the ember storm itself is, it's not going to affect the living trees. Just the amount of heat that's coming in that direction could be, maybe 80, 90 degrees. Wind, it's extremely hot, burn your skin on contact, but it just takes a couple of embers to ignite a house when it's been living through this condition for, half an hour. So it doesn't take much. Ember storms in Australia, we know all about them, and we have situational awareness. We've got mandated that if you're in a fire-prone area, that you'll have not sprinklers on the roof just to spray water idly over your neighbour's house, because that's what a sprinkler would do in high wind. It wouldn't touch your house at all. But it's to fill your gutters up with water, so that if an ember is to fly through the air, that the gutter around around your roof perimeter is going to be filled with water, and therefore you're not going to get a little oscillation or like a rotation or a tornadic movement of air that can contain an ember and then stay glowing and get hotter maybe with the wind, and then get up under the tiles and set the house on fire. It won't do it. It'll touch the water and go out. And so the greatest protection that you can have with an oncoming fire is to fill up your gutters with water, like block them at the top, not at the bottom, but at the top where the downpipes are. Block those, and then you fill up your gutters, and then your house is so much safer. Even before the flames are there, because flames will hot enough, they can be like 1500 degrees right in front of the flames when the flames are ripping along the ground. There was a lady who in Australia, she had some kind of container. I forget what it was, like it was a metal tub or something. She had plants in it. She tipped the plants out, jumped in the pool, put the metal container over her head with enough oxygen, and every once in a while she lifted up the side to regain some more oxygen, just as the flames were going past her house. Now this whole action was going to take just a couple of minutes, but she lifted it up at the wrong time, and she inhaled and she burnt the insides of her lungs, not because of flames, just because of the pure heat that was in the air. Now she was in water, up to her neck in water, with this tub holding it underneath the water's surface, and her skin burnt through the water. It became unbearable, and she was found gasping for air and all of the same things that you would have from inhalation, but it wasn't smoke, it was hot air. So she burnt the inside of the lung. Poor way to go. That's just terrible. So look, if there's fires in your area, obey the commands of the emergency services. If they say leave, leave. If they say stay, stay. But if you want to do some extra protection, block up your gutters from being on a ladder. Block them temporarily, and fill your gutters up with water and keep them filled, because you'll have no town water to fight anything, because everyone in the entire street will have the taps on, and there's not enough pressure to save anyone's life, not even your own. Right? So just be really careful. I know all this because I've got a fire pump, and I have fire hose with fire nozzle. I've got firefighting gear here, and I've got 10,000 litres of water to protect my house only. And my house is made of concrete and steel, and the only thing you can burn is the deck, the actual deck. That's it. So, but the fires on the outside of glass glass will allow infrared energy to come through, and inside your curtains can combust just from the heat. So, I suggest that you, thanks for the Canberra firestorm there, Amiga Logos. That was in 2003, and it ripped through pine forests. It was so terrible that it took out an entire suburb of houses. So we remember all these. Canberra and Melbourne, we have all these things, but Sydney is ringed by forest, and I'm in the forest, and it's a tragedy to see that people aren't reducing the fuel load, and the fuel load has been building up since I don't know, maybe 2008. It's been building up and building up, and now it's tinder dry. The ground is dry, the fallen leaves are dry, and there's no raking them up, right? You're not going to rake up the leaves because it's the bush, right? And we have trees that have the same flammable nature of the oil within it, which is like kerosene, and they just burst into flames. The whole tree, as soon as it hits like an optimal temperature, will exude its oil load and immediately burst into flames. It's so crazy. Plus all the gum trees, good luck with that. You got basically the whole of California is gum trees now, and they actually reproduce upon fire. Their seeds are designed to withstand the fire and germinate because of the fire. They're so fire hardy. In fact, when a fire comes through and rips through, it can either just burn the canopy or just burn the mid-range within the forest, the 3 levels of forest, or it can just burn the ground. And then a subsequent fire, months later, can come through as a canopy fire. Yeah, the eucalyptus, thanks. But there's eucalyptus oils, and there's another one, I think it's called the kerosene tree, right, that we have here, which you don't have there. And it just basically burns like it's fuel. It is fuel. I swear we should be growing those and squeezing every last drop of the fuel out and running our cars on it. It's crazy. So a lot to take in. What I'm saying is this is going to be one of the worst fire seasons ever in Australia and globally. Can't explain it globally, but I know every person that's a friend of mine on Facebook hears from me that the world isn't going into an ice age. And if you don't believe me, come here and see what it's like. Like I've got thick curtains, right? Thick. They're really thick curtains. And it's 5:30 p.m. and the heat being generated on a cloudy day through, and it's actually cool air outside, but the energy of the sun's light is such in a different wavelength than people are willing to admit. So our government, something like, I think it was 96 or earlier, mandated that all school children must wear hats. Must. Now this wasn't because he likes children in hats, right? He might have been on Epstein's plane, I don't know, but I'm just kidding. The hat was to protect them from the possible lawsuits that would come later on, because the government knew that the UV light was so intense that it'll cause everybody from this generation to get cancer at some point in their life, skin cancer. So it's so bad, and you can burn so quickly within 15 minutes of sun exposure. Within 15 minutes. So wherever you are on the planet, if you can be outside all day, without a top on, without any sunscreen, and you go, you know what, this is great. You know, like I used to do in California. I used to spend all day there. Right? I was the brownest I've ever been in my whole life. I come here and you can't be in the sun. The sun is so bad for you, and you get deep tissue burns from our sun. Same sun, right? Different density of atmosphere. I can only explain it like that. So anyway, if you don't believe me, come here and I'll film you and put it on YouTube, right? I will absolutely do that. So I had someone called the Reaver of Darkness. Great name too, by the way, on YouTube. Look them up, the Reaver of Darkness. They said that the funnel web that I had was completely harmless, and that they would come here and be happily bitten by one. I bet it was bitten, of course. Bitten by one, and that they would survive just fine without antivenin. And I said, well, if you're going to do it, come to my house, because I've got them everywhere in my yard. Not a problem at all. If you're willing to do it to yourself, I'll film it, and I'll get all the revenue. I'll even share half of you still alive, but you won't be, right? Right? I'd be willing to film you, but I'd be calling the emergency services the moment it happened. Maybe even organise them to be on standby, because you're not going to survive it. And they refuse to believe me. This is the kind of armchair expert. Now, I know that I can turn into an armchair expert when I'm watching an Olympic Games sport on television. Suddenly, I know everything about it. And even though I don't, and I admit it, I have no idea about some sports. I have a general knowledge and a general understanding of physics. I know how a sport would work, but the finite rules, maybe not so much. Like if I'm watching curling, I know they've got to do the thing, and they're going to run up and it's the sweeping dudes and the thing. That's pretty much my extent of it. But I'll shout and I'll complain to bad decisions, and I'll be one of the mob who's an armchair expert. So this armchair expert believed that, they believe that funnel webs aren't deadly, and since no one's died from them since whatever it is that we've become immune or something, right? They kept on, and of course not true. There was a young girl recently who she found a shoe in her house and just started playing with it, and there was a spider in it, and it bit her, because that's where the spiders like to go here. You can't leave your shoes outside, because that's what they want to live in. They want to live in the perfect shape of a shoe, and they do. And that was the end of that. The child basically sweated out within half an hour. Thanks, Paul. Within half an hour, they sweated out all of their body liquids, like profuse sweating, even from, I joke about the back of your fingernails were sweating. That was sweating so hard. And the parents went, holy, what happened? And the spider's long gone, right? They don't know what's going on. They take it to the hospital, and it was too late. It was already too late. So anyway, they found the bite later on. They determined it to be after some forensics. And this is the kind of armchair critic that I'm finding all over the place. This is the funniest thing, right? So I've been posting in all these news articles on Facebook, and I love Solaris, by the way. She's been posting some really nice things, great balanced information. I love it, and this is what I like to. I feel like I'm just informing my friends about the ways of the world outside of their little home shops and work triangle that people feel so comfortable in. You take someone out of that home shops work triangle by making them go to a different work, or making them go to different shops, or they've got to stay at someone else's house, and they just immediately aren't comfortable or capable with dealing there with normal routine. It's crazy, right? So anyway, this is what I like to do. I like to keep people informed. Now, I've got a few of my friends who don't really care, couldn't care less what the hell I post, think I'm a crazy nut. Fine. I ask them, what would you do if this, and I try to put some like a situation up, and they go, oh, if the world was coming to an end, I'd probably just go to the bottle shop and get some, the bottle shop is where you buy alcohol from, and I just drink. I drink until the end, and I wouldn't care. What? You wouldn't even try to fight? No, I'm good, they say. So I'm not like that. I would fight for my last breath of air, right? To stay living through. I don't even care what it is. That's how intent I am in continuing this. There's a whole bunch of people out there that believe that they've been instructed to behave in a certain manner when the time comes. They don't know what the time is or what they're supposed to do, but they feel like they've got to stay here and they've got some job and they've got to do that job, and that job's really important. And I think that's fantastic. And there's other people who haven't been so eagerly informed and choose not to. So some of the things that I've been putting up, our government has gone absolutely power hungry. They're high on power and making the stupidest of decisions. We had one of the largest protests we've probably seen in decades of climate change activists. And when I say activists, I can't say that everyone in there was actively preventing climate change, because I believe that's what an activist is, rather than people attending a climate change protest wishing that the government would change the policies enabling climate change to be lessened, reduced, zeroed, have a net zero, impact. I'm not talking about the cause, just saying we should find a way of being able to reduce something of its cause, of its effect, sorry. So, as you know from me, I try to stay away from the cause, because I've got my own ideas and I'm not pushing those on anyone. You do your own research and make up your own mind. You tell me what's going on. So the government has decided, right? Well, it cost us heaps in police because, those climate activists, geez, they're not violent at all, but it takes a lot of police because, if you have, 1 million people, you've got to have police there because, what happens if something goes wrong? So they're saying, well, all the unemployed people who are going to these protests, we're going to charge you for going so we can cover the cost of the police. You're going to do what now? You're going to democracy? What was funny is I felt as though that was the end of democracy, when the government says we're going to start to tell people that they can't protest because, it's expensive. Right? That's really funny. So what does that really mean? They've already passed a law to say if you wish to protest, you need a permit. And they've got to agree, the government has to agree that the thing you're protesting against is allowed, that they're allowing you to do it. So you've got to, get a bended knee and say, yes, sir, please, sir, I would like some more. You've got to beg to be able to have a protest. Now that's fine. It officializes the whole thing, and it suggests that, you're part of its mandate, right, in the legislation is that you've got to say where you're going to commence, where your building zone, or the zone in which you're going to collect all the people together. Beyond me if I can remember the word. Your staging area, there you go. So your staging area for your protest is going to be here at some park, usually, because they're big. And then we're going to walk down this exact route, and then we're going to have another staging area with our, those big announcements at the end. We're going to have a stage, we're going to have some speakers, we're going to have some people get up there, and we're going to, spruik all the benefits of the march. So we're going to, basically create a successful march by doing this. And then the government has to go, I stamped this with approval, thank you very much. It's in triplicate, 2 months in advance. I don't know how long the advance notice is supposed to be, but you just can't do it that morning. Plus you've got to organise your march anyway, right? So, and it gives enough people from all around the planet to fly in and get stayed up in hotels and become interested in the topic. And if you're a bush person, word of mouth would finally get to you, and you better come down from your bush lair. I made that up. And attend, and rightly so, right? You need at least 6 weeks notice on anything, but probably going to be at least 3 months notice for a reasonably well attended and crucial protest. So climate change, look, Mackie and I both agree that the climate has been continually changing and has never quite been static the whole time. We've had the Younger Dryas exit with some meteor impacts, which ended an ice age. we also saw those same impacts in the greatest loss of megafauna on the planet. And from then on, it's been steadily warming because it's returning back to a state where there's no land ice anywhere, and there's no sea ice anywhere, and the temperature is higher, and that would go back to supporting those massive insects that we've seen in fossilized records, like 1 foot long dragonflies and things like that. So that requires a lot of oxygen to be able to support them. The carbon dioxide, well, plants love that anyway, so the more things living, the more plants there are, and it's a symbiotic relationship. If there weren't any people on the planet and there was no fires and was nothing, the plants would have a very slow existence because there wouldn't be anything producing what it is they turn into oxygen through photosynthesis. There just wouldn't be any. Maybe some composting materials, yeah, that's a thing as well. And if the meteor, for instance, hit a coral reef, all of that material would also become carbon dioxide. So calcium carbonate is just trapped carbon with calcium carbonate, and if you can destroy the calcium, then you are left with carbon dioxide. So that, and look, it's simple, just as simple. The problem is, what can we do about it? So all the people that are complaining that there isn't such a thing as climate change still have to be aware. If they're saying the climate doesn't change at all, or isn't changing, regardless of the cause again, then I just have to say that you're still going to have difficulty because the sea level is rising, and rising so fast now that it's way off the charts. I have to admit to you that it's raised 20 centimeters since, I think it's 2015. In the last 5 or 4 years, it's raised 20 centimeters. Now, you don't care, no one cares. 5 of those rises is a meter. Yeah, 5 of those rises is a meter. You rise a meter, go ahead. Do whatever you want. I don't care what you do. But don't complain. Don't complain that it's rising. That's going to be your downfall. Don't complain or don't disagree that it's rising, because the proof is there. All your tide heights going back 200 years. I've analysed all the data. I've actually got the data, and I've made charts out of it. And I know this would normally happen in post, but I'm sure that I've got a slide for it that you'd be able to get. Oh, news, no. Oh my goodness, I've got so many slides here. I just can't see the one that says see the bugger. Anyway, I'll do it in post anyway for the YouTube. But anyway, I've done this, right? I've already graphed the whole lot. But our Australian government was clever enough to make the problem go away by not providing historical information for the sea level heights, the medians and the low tides from 2000 onwards. That's when they basically decided they weren't going to propagate any of this and keep it under wraps. And every other month I've had to get those three, the height, the greatest low, and the median, and do that for every month since 2000. And I've done it. And it still doesn't help us. It doesn't help us because the sea level's still rising. And there's some work that I've noticed down at sea level where our infrastructure for our railways are, and I've noticed that they're building up the line ever slowly, because we're less than a metre away from the sea. It's an inlet, but still the sea at sea level with tidal movement will exceed the land mass of what's called the peninsula here in New South Wales, where I live, Central Coast. And all the places are within 2 meters of sea level, the current sea level. And it's getting worse. Some of the jetties are almost completely underwater at the high tide marks. The Queen's Step at the Opera House, that's one of the things. That's like Building 7, right? Sea level rise deniers, I just have to mention the Queen's Step. The Queen's Step was the step in which the Queen could step off a vessel at the Opera House in Sydney Harbour onto a dry step. That's it. It's now no longer exposed to air. And they believed that the whole of the Opera House was sinking, but it's built on sandstone and it's 700 metres thick and it's not going anywhere, and they discovered it subsequently, just like Rumbach, the researcher that we've been doing the deja vu and reincarnation show cycle on, went 10 years and researched a way of being able to debunk reincarnation, and yet only proved it as a result. So just to highlight, 1,088 people, that's if you didn't catch the show, 1,088 people were regressed to a former life in which they described it completely, being able to describe footwear, food, family, size and activities, and what kind of work they did, so all their clothing and what they ate. And what were the conditions like? What was the weather like? All the things that you could do today, describing about your environment. What kind of tech? What did you use to eat? What did you put the food on? All these things, and only 10 of the 1,088 people, all of the other 1,078 people, were all confirmed. Each of their stories were confirmed to a place and a time, matching that and giving more information on a whole than was recorded in history. Even the best historians said, wow, I didn't know that was a thing. Or if every one of those persons mentioned the same thing and then they researched further into it to discover that was really a thing. It was real. It's real. So, it's great to hear that in the pursuit of debunking something, you inevitably prove it. Well, the same thing with the tide heights. Looking at a beach and taking a photograph from, 75 years ago and saying, look, it hasn't changed the height. It's a beach with moving sand. And the sand will give you no indication whatsoever of where that ocean is at any time. However, the artist's impression and building structures from all around Sydney Harbour, and the tide heights measured from what was known as Pinch Gut, which is a tiny little sandstone island with sandstone structure, which was used for the Australian height datum for the whole of Australia. That little site there, which hasn't actually changed in height, has recorded the sea level coming up and up and up and up and up and up, and it's not stopping. All those people with coastal property where you may see some inundation, and I think specifically around Florida, around to Texas, because of the slight slope that maybe Texas has, you're going to have to make decisions at some point, right? That's just the way it is. So everything have a look on a map, everything that's within 2 meters from the current sea level, look to see how flat that is, and be amazed if it is flat. And remember these words: it was formerly underwater in an intertidal zone, or it was maybe just 2 or 3 meters deep, full of water at that point on those places. Look, I'm not morbid, I'm just factual. I did the research, I found it out for myself, and now I have no fear. I have no fear, I have a plan, and the plan involves surviving whatever the naysayers say. See, could you imagine, right? The government has no longer wanted people to know about it. They don't want anyone to know. So they hide the information, bury it, and why? Imagine how many, how much wealth there is locked up in coastal property that can still have plenty of time to change hands and sell over and over again to different interested parties, and therefore, earning the government tons of money in tax revenue from the sale and blah, blah, blah. If it was a fire sale and no one wanted to live there, there's a whole new set of rules that's just been set up. If it was a fire sale, the government said, oh, look, it's going to rise at 4 meters. Good luck with that. And no one could offload those houses to anyone. I'm sure they all know. I'm sure they don't care. I'm sure that there's nothing that they've set themselves, apart from anyone to do anything. How are they going to survive it? Because, 2 meters of sea level rise, there's no infrastructure. All the things we know about society today is pretty much gone. So anyway, I'm going to move on because that was really funny. A story that came up this week, and I can't believe he did it, but he did. And I'm specifically talking about Trevor Noah. So Trevor Noah had Hillary Clinton and I think Chelsea Clinton, the daughter, on the show, on his show, and he did, I suppose, what the internet has wanted to ask her face to face, and my jaw dropped when I saw it. I could not believe that he did. So I post a ton of things, usually hashtag bodies. Whenever something is killed because they got too close to the information, I repost and I put hashtag bodies there because there's a growing pile of people who got too close to the truth and were taken out. So with that in mind, here is what Trevor Noah asked Hillary. I can't play the audio clip, but I'll read it out to you. Noah asks, or Trevor asks, I have to ask you a question that has been plaguing me for a while. There's a big pause. He goes, how did you kill Jeffrey Epstein? He asked Hillary Clinton, on air, on his show. Oh my goodness, I nearly fell up over the back of my chair onto the floor. I was so surprised by this. I could not believe that he said it. He says, because you're not in power, but you have all the power. And he said, I really need to understand how you do what you do, because you seem to be behind everything nefarious, and yet you do not use it to become president. Wow. Oh, the audience of the show burst into laughter, thinking, oh, you know what, there's a few reasons why you laugh. One is someone does something that you could not have imagined someone did, and they did, and that's what I think where the laughing came from. The other is usually if someone hurts themselves, there's a whole bunch of that in there, or if someone makes a mistake, people will laugh. But for the most part, it's when someone does something that you would never have done, but they got away with it somehow. And this is what happened. So Noah then asked Clinton what it feels like being the boogeyman of the right. Oh my goodness. So if you haven't caught the clip, go watch the clip, because her facial expressions are priceless. Absolutely priceless. It says, she answers, well, it's a constant surprise to me. After some time, she gets the words together to state this. And because the things they say, and now, of course, it's on steroids with being online, are so ridiculous beyond any imagination that I could have, she says. And yet, they they are so persistent in putting forth these crazy ideas and theories. Honestly, I don't know what I ever did to get them so upset. That's what she says. My goodness me. You know what? If Trevor Noah ever thought that he would end up getting posted by me as #bodies, I think he's the closest he's ever going to be to that. That's not the question that you ask. Like, that's not like asking, Fat Tony from The Simpsons, where do you put all the bodies? Right? That's crazy. How on earth did he get away with that? Well, so far he has. I suppose every morning he's going to hand his car keys over to his kids and say, hey, who wants to start Daddy's car? What's the way that people die? It's car accidents because their brakes got cut, no one checks anymore. It's, this mysterious sudden onset of, simultaneous hundreds of cancers on their body. So they were like hit with an energy weapon of some kind that destroys your DNA. Heart attack, just miraculously maybe hit with one of those, the heart attack weapon that it melts, like it's frozen and goes into you and doesn't even leave a mark on your body, but you die of a heart attack. All these things that have been rumored to exist because it just happens, or he'll have, that's right, he'll have a suicide event. Right? Suicide, yeah. So all the people who claimed to have information against the Clintons who have passed away, days before the hearing, no one seems to care. Or maybe everyone seems to care and they care too much about their own life and want to shut the hell up. Maybe that's the real thing we're talking about here. Maybe self-preservation's keeping this story under wraps. Because I truly wonder how long he's got left to go now. My goodness. Chelsea laughed the whole thing off, saying the whole thing was preposterous. And she gave an example of something else. But she never said no. How did you kill Jeffrey Epstein? She never actually denied it. She never said, clearing her name, she never said, maybe I find that question offensive. I didn't kill him. Or maybe she said, I never did the killing, nor did I ever order the killing. Maybe they could do that. Maybe she should have said that, and that would have made all of this problem go away. But now all she's done is laughed it off, and and she only made point of describing the problem of being accused of everything on the internet, not specifically just the Epstein thing. I'm sure I'm at the right time now. I'm sure it's 50. Oh, okay, there you go. So, look, stay tuned for a short break. I'm sure we're at 56 and 30 seconds. Stay tuned for my show again on the other side, The Shiny Side Out, episode 398. And I'll probably get onto some better information on the other side. Oh, what a day! And I'll contact Mecky and see if he's available. He was he's sort of indisposed at the moment. Okay, there you go. So nearly there. For the short break. No, the break music hasn't started yet. It's always a surprise, this daylight saving change. It's always a surprise. Let's see. And no, still no audio from the station. Well, I'll just keep an ear out for it. Look, while I've got you, it's a great time to suggest that you should buy some of the station's merchandise. You should subscribe to the archives, to what I do. No. Yep, still no music. And have a look for a donation to the station whereby you can receive a gift in return, like a knife, a thumb drive. And I'm not sure how many woodworking products still remain, but look, keep a lookout for that.
To suggest that you should buy some.
Yeah, still no audio. Goodness me. I wonder if there's someone at the station who can push that old button and make that bumper start up.
Still no music?
Yeah, it's still not happening. Anyway. Yeah, so, that's right. I really just want to say with the fires, the air quality in where I live has worse than China's with all of the fires going on around me.
Still remain, but
Isn't that crazy? Worse than you've seen the footage of China, right? So this whole week has just been every day you wake up, looks like fog, but it's not, it's just smoke. But the fires aren't close enough. They're just close enough to blow the smoke on us.
Still not happening. Anyway.
Yeah, still no music, no station break yet. That's all right. And if you didn't know, the fires are in, Tasmania, Amazon, California as well, and they're all over the Philippines, and you name it where they are, through Africa as well.
Week.
Wow, goodness me, still nothing. It's one of those days, I suppose. And look, I hope your week has been as fruitful as mine. I say fruitful. I mean, I didn't grow any fruit. A lot of fruit. Just hoping it was...
Tasmania.
That it was reasonable. Like the reason for waking up and learning one thing in the entire day, that you achieved it. Try and do it, doesn't matter what it is, and try and take a different path to work. Even if it's only one street, or even if it's you just do something different.
It's one of the...
Goodness me. So, hey, look, on the continuous, I feel like Cross to the Clowns going, it's been 44 hours so far. So I have 7 days to go on this continuous broadcast.
Just hoping it was...
Hey, Johnny Quest there in the chat room, and Johnson as well, and Blasphemous Buddha, and Jer Bear. Hey, Jer Bear. If anyone hears the music, just let me know, because I'm not hearing it.
Even if it's only one street, or even if it's you just do something different.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think that all the times got thrown around because of daylight saving changes there, right? I think that's what's happened. Yeah? Yeah, anyone? Let me know. Because there's 2 daylight saving changes for us, and it affects us
As well, and Blasphemous Buddha.
At different times of the year. So twice a year we have different events. We have ours, and then a gap, and then yours, and it shifts our show start time by 2 hours in one direction.
Around because of daylight saving changes there, right? I think that's what's happened.
There's definitely no station break. Well, if someone hears the music, can you let me know, and I'll stop checking. All right. Thanks, Jibber. Now, I may as well say...
In times of the year.
Since I think the breaks are all have an issue, that you're back once again with Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com, on the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for only $5 a month. That's US dollars. If you're new to Shiny Side Out, welcome aboard. This is a tinfoil hat zone, please be reminded. So keep your arms within the vehicle, turn off your personal reality inverters, and please, no flash photography. We're glad you're on board though, and thank you for inviting us into your lives. So follow, subscribe, or otherwise for the appropriate social media platform. That's very important. We're halfway through show number 398. 890 and 300, says Mickey, who's unfortunately can't be with me today. But what I'm going to say is I'm just going to quickly, while I'm talking, that's me not talking, I'm just going to see if Mickey's available for the second half, or maybe we can do like a live cross to him where he's currently at. Let me see. I'm asking him, are you okay? and available for a live cross. Let's see, he might be able to find himself a nice quiet spot. And the word live, misspelt as L-I-C-W, my one thumbed typing is absolutely terrible. Right, so Jeb Air, is that the time now where the station is that you've just typed in? He's typed in a time, and it's really difficult to work out what's going on, because I see on the right hand side in the chat I only see my own time. For instance, I see 6:01 or 6:03.
Spelled as L.
Yeah, that's all I see. And if I type in the word time, the chat room doesn't respond with anything. So, all right, I've done that. What else? Oh yeah, get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website. An EMP-proof thumb drive with survival documents, or a 75,000 seed pack, which you can put in the fridge and it can last, like, I'm just guessing. I'm not an expert on seeds, but from what I've heard, maybe 10 years or more, right, in the freezer until you need it. Remember, the freezer's going to be there until the electricity is gone. And when the electricity is gone is when you need the seeds anyway, right? So that would be really, really handy for you. And what do you do when there's no electricity? You eat the ice cream first. Hey, Jeb Bear. Oh, that's very funny, Jeb Bear, by the way. He said the bartender told him it was midnight. But you know, I've got 6:04 p.m. here. Don't know what time it is where you are. I'm gonna guess maybe just a rough guess. It's not 11 p.m. It should be 12 now, right? But going back 2 hours, does it happen? So, or forward 2 hours for you, so it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Is it 2 a.m.? I'll let Jeb Bear work that out. All right. So, see, what would normally happen, right? If this was a normal show and Mickey was with me, we would talk about the very next show in our show cycle. And we were up to, I think, part 5. And what we had ready for tonight's show was that there was research done in reincarnation. This is just a teaser for the next show when Mickey's on board. There was a regression done on people to see past lives, but progression on those to see a future life, because this thing about the now being the future is also the future is now. And so that you should be able to see the future or have lived the past, and it should still be now. I hope you're with me. That if time is linear in a box, as Einstein suggests, then your life has already been described. It's already been lived, except that you're living a point along that path. Does that make sense? So that you should be able to see the future. You should, because it's already happened. Because all the future and now is the same thing. And therefore, progression, you should be able to report on what's going forward. And that's why the CIA or the FBI or whoever it is that was running Montauk was also looking into remote viewing, which is the now, and future viewing, or remote viewing the future, which is still the now. I hope you're keeping up, because there is no difference. The scientists have said there's no difference between the now and the future, that they're one thing. So if they've been looking into, what's it, Ed Dames' research is about the future, and his inevitably everyone found the kill shot, but with no timeline. So you've got to describe what's around you and discover the thing that happens to be able to know when it's going to be, because you can't see what time it is You're not looking at your watch. You haven't opened a paper to look at the date. So it's very difficult because some of these things look like they're only tomorrow, but they can be a couple of years away. It reminds me of an old Stephen Wright joke where he says, "A few years ago I was..." Oh no, that was yesterday. I love that joke, Stephen Wright. Well done. One of my favourite comedians of all time. His deadpan delivery is, I mean, it's an act, but it's very funny. So be with me on this. So the seeing the future shouldn't be any more difficult than it is to see the now, and that was the issue, was just dating it. Given that, just dramatic pause. Given that information was okay, that we should be looking at the progression of people, not regression, to be able to possibly extract some details from the future. And this doesn't have to be just Ed Dames, it can be anyone. If in the right conditions you're put forward, if only 10 out of 1,088 people got it wrong, maybe, Mickey and I question, maybe it wasn't this reality that they were describing. It could be another one. So it's to be taken into consideration. But for the debunker, Wambach, she was keen on proving a single theory, or disproving the theory, inevitably proving it. So we've got some information from people who have been doing progression that we're going to release to you guys in our next show, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that. There's a number of people working on this, but there isn't a lot of information you can get from it yet. So we've been collecting this, and there's actually a fellow from India who was, for want of a better word, I'll just say he passed away. And it seems like it might be an Indian hashtag bodies, but we haven't done the research into that yet, except we can say that the fellow is no longer alive. His information is available on Audible, and there aren't many clips of him any longer. Most of it's been removed. But in true, subcontinent India is concerned, it's out there, it's everywhere. You should be able to find something somewhere. And we're working on getting some more of that info for you. But what he was saying was that people are connected, and being conscious, you have a connection with your loved ones, your siblings. I already knew all this, but those of you who don't know it, you just need to accept that it's a thing. Have you ever felt as though, if you're a twin, you know what I mean? Because people have lived dissimilar lives, but have the same attitude and likes despite not having the same exposure to things. I hope that makes sense. And therefore they've always felt like they were connected together. I know that I've connected to some people, and I knew whether they flew in and out of the country, I knew if they were okay, I knew when they weren't well. And I think that's just a natural thing that we can all do. I think we all have the power to connect to a significant other, and that we're able to not have empathy so much as an empathetic experience, that you're experiencing their emotion with them. So they're sharing it with you. It's using Facebook terms, they've decided to share their location with you and what they're feeling. So if you're a parent, you might have an understanding of your child's well-being at some time of night, somewhere doing something. You have a sixth sense in being able to identify if something was wrong. Or in some cases, when someone's sibling has gone missing, they said, we know they're still alive. They don't know in the conventional sense, but they have that connection which describes they're still alive. And it's really important. I think it's important to recognise that this thing is a real thing, and this poor fellow who was, you know, on the talk circuit talking this stuff up, and he had a really big name for himself, not in our circles here, but certainly in India, where they've got like a full belief of reincarnation, where it was just simply deleted, like we mentioned in a previous show. It was deleted from our religions and in the West, and it's not something we're supposed to even talk about for some reason. Imagine, right, if we had the instruction manual. Being a Human, Volume 1. Thank you. So, congratulations on your purchase of The Human Condition, and then go into deep description of everything that we can do. Imagine that. What a tremendous thing. That concept, I think, was explored in America's Greatest Superhero with the suit, and they lost the suit and didn't know what they could actually do with it. So, very similar, I expect, is that. So, I think I've got a message back from Becky. 1 second. Respect. Too much noise, you can't find a quiet place. That's all right. I've only got 45 minutes to go. That shouldn't be too bad. I'm just going to reply back, okay. Poor thing. And every once in a while, I hear someone breathe in on this call. So if there's someone connected to the station, just make sure I can hear the audio at the end. That would be lovely. Now, and it's not myself breathing in, because it happens when I'm not breathing in. So, yeah, just to let you know I can hear you. Anyway, if you're on, you might want to mute so I don't hear it anymore. So, alright, so I wish there was an instruction manual. It's crazy that there isn't one. And I think the more we learn and the more we know as a result of our experiences, that there's two things that occur, right? We're isolated from each other. I think some of the things that we experience are maybe personal, and no one really intends on sharing that depth of personal experience. But those who do, and those who are in, you know, particular circles, might be able to share it within a small group, and eventually that might make it out of the group, and some other people might want to also see if they can learn how to experience the same things. Then you start to have teachings on it, and if we really get the idea and how to use it, maybe we'll be smart enough and in a mindset in some point in the future where it becomes an acceptable practice. And so Mekki and I have spoken at length about not just the connectivity, but a broadcast and receiving ability that you would normally call telepathy. We've done some shows on this as well, and the shows have broken down what's the actual definition of telepathy, and it really just means speaking at someone, like thinking it at someone. That's really all it is. But it's truly more than that. I'm just going to close, hang on one second. I'm just going to close my door. I'm going to sound like I'm getting further away. That's because I am. Further away, getting closer again, closer. I'm just narrating because you can't see me. And for that, for being able to think at someone, is a terrible description of what it really means. Because, you know, thinking words at someone isn't telepathy. There's more than words. We're extremely emotional in the way that we're able to pass body language through communication. And I've had some intelligent people tell me, more intelligent than I am, more knowledgeable, I should say. Maybe I should say trained in that particular part of human behavior, that told me that the majority of our communication is actually by visible means. So, meaning that you use body language, facial expressions. Now, you can't hear that when I'm pulling a face. But you can tell, and I can assure you that if I stand up, that you can tell because my demeanor changes in my voice, because I'm now talking down to the audience. But if I'm sitting comfortably, it's as though we're sitting across the table from each other. And that's the way I like to do my show. If I have a microphone, it's maybe a little bit more autocratic. I'm just giving information out to people, and they can do what they like with it. Whereas I think it's a little bit more intimate, having I'm in a particularly dark room, although it's only 6 to 18 p.m. and I'm sweltering here by the frequency coming through the curtains, the dark curtains. And I swear, if there was no lights or screens on this room, it'd be extremely dark. And yet, this energy persists. I wish we had like a meter in which you could measure all wavelengths coming from the sun, for instance, and to put it inside your house and see what you can receive. Like you know, when military people using the germanium night vision version 3 glasses, right, or vision, and they're able to film someone's house, take a photograph of it, and say, this is all your heat loss in winter. Everything that's glowing you need to fix because it's basically just a radiator radiating out, losing all your heat from inside. If we had the same technology to be able to measure it from the inside, to see the actual frequency, the wavelength of the energy, it'd be great. Because then we'd start to do things with it. Like we could see whether those were truly directed energy weapons that were being hit on those houses. If you were driving along, could you imagine if you had goggles and you could see Wi-Fi? Imagine if you could see 2.5 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. Maybe you could just dial it in so you could see it like on a flare, right? You could see the colors of these different frequencies. That'd be amazing, right? Where would you want to live if you could see all that? Probably where there wasn't any of it. Isn't it ironic that the thing that we choose to use for our communication was typically absent in our environment for a reason, that it made our DNA and life exist because these frequencies weren't on the planet. You think about if our planet, for instance, was more towards the center of our galaxy, not in the center, because that's impossible. It's a very large object there, and it would be a tortuous environment to live in. But just the radiation from the other stars being clustered so close together could possibly mean that it would be daylight 24/7, that your planet would be bombarded 24/7 by gamma ray bursts, for instance, or extremely high frequency, maybe not all the way up in gamma rays, but certainly dangerous enough that DNA couldn't exist. That'd be tough. So one of those things that I think about is if you could see the current wavelengths here on the planet, like radio telescopes want to be where there's no radio, optical telescopes want to be where there's no background light or light radiation from large cities. So if you could see all this stuff, you would want to be where there wasn't anything, because I think you'd get a pretty good handle on what was safe and what wasn't. It's like the people apparently that were involved in Montauk who decided to have lives in the middle of nowhere. They themselves isolated themselves from people, maybe because they got so good at doing what they could do that they wanted to quiet their minds down because they could hear other conversations going on. They hear it in a way that wasn't their voice. They weren't speaking to themselves, but rather hearing other people's thoughts by isolating themselves from everyone. That's pretty interesting. I really like the way, the realm that this is. And I was thinking about their neural link. Yeah. Canadian, I'm just going to answer the question. Did Australia legalise marijuana yet? No. It is decriminalised in 2 states for personal use only. One being the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory, which is a territory within the state that I live in, and it's where our Canberra politicians basically run the country from. And it's in a valley which is far enough from the ocean to avoid bombardment from ship. That was the reason for putting it where it was. Except that missiles now mean that it's ridiculous to put something so far away from the coastline. It makes no point at all, 0 point. And Adelaide, or South Australia for that matter, South Australia has decriminalised weed as well. However, at the same time, I have to say that there's a push right now for pill testing at large outdoor music events, which the New South Wales government, the government in the state that I live in, has refused point blank to do that, because that's basically saying that we condone it. That's not a good position to be in for them. However, I believe that we should go the entire opposite direction, from criminalised to full legal production by Big Pharma, with taxes, correct dosage, estimatable dosage. Like if you're going to have a headache tablet, on the pack it'll say with this age you should take 2 within a certain time frame, that you can't take any more. 2 should be the limit. Don't mix this with any other drugs. There's drug warnings on there. There's information in which you can have a predictable experience with a predictable dosage in a with drugs that were made in conditions which provides a uniformity and safety for the user. We do that currently with, Panadol, for instance, or any of those paracetamol products. And we trust, to a certain extent, the tablets we need to take for these kinds of conditions. We trust it. And you don't die from taking these big pharma created medications that are for the general use and available over the counter. You don't tend to die from those unless you overconsume. So if all of the, I don't know what class they're called, whatever the class drugs they are, for people to enjoy music festivals, as they have been doing for at least 30 years that I'm aware of, and possibly all the way back as far as the 60s, right, in the US particularly. For those drugs to be made in safe, controlled conditions, legislated, clean, predictable dosage, bought by, over the counter, but through in Australia we have a registered thing. You've got to produce ID. It's recorded that you bought it, and then they can see the frequency in which you consume them. And that's done for pseudoephedrine as part of a cold and flu tablet that's a behind the counter purchase, not the over the counter purchase. Like off the shelf purchase, I should say, not available in supermarkets. So that should be the thing and the method and the availability of them, of the big pharma manufactured drugs for use at just for instance, not naming them, but at music festivals, for instance. Because the people who have been dying have bought something that's been made in a garage, presumably, not an organised crime syndicate or something like that, who, I don't know, right? They're just not made with consistent quantity and expectation of dosage. Those people have been in line with sniffer dogs coming up behind them, who have decided that they, rather than go to jail, I should take what I've got in my pocket. They've taken them all at once, and they've had a really terrible time, and sometimes fatally. I think that's the wrong way of going about it, since they've been around for, goodness me, 40 years, right? 50 years. why not just give in and do it legally, and do it so that you can track the cost, you can tax it, and the taxes can go in the right direction towards, improving, education. I really don't care. Improve education or roads, do whatever you want with it, right? But the government needs to use those funds, and they have to use those funds correctly. I would not like my child to make a life-changing choice to consume one for the first time, only to find out that it wasn't made in a controlled environment, the dosage wasn't accurately described, yeah, and that they passed away as a result of having that single choice. I don't want that choice, a child of mine, to be the last choice they made because of a government regulation. That to me is preposterous. I think the people who are trying to keep it banned are trying to do it for a different reason. And there's some people talking in the chat room, and I'm not going to name you specifically, but saying big pharma is untrustworthy. Absolutely. I'm not going to say that I trust them, but I trust the ability for them to produce a headache tablet in which I can live through by making the right choices. Yeah, and I would prefer that this happens rather than the unfortunates who are making the choice that they believe is correct and not making it through their choice. I'm doing it for the kids. I'm not about to go out and start doing this stuff. But for those people who wish to do it, isn't that what we all fight for? Right? For people to make the right choices in life and to make them safely. I think that's really important. Of course, there's people going to be buying them and getting people who wouldn't normally take them anyway still to buy them and then sell them. But the selling of black market regular drugs, right, only to conceal their use, maybe, I don't know, but for profit, is undermined by the companies selling them reasonably cheaply, and there wouldn't be any great profit involved in it, and therefore the black market, if it goes away, the black market would still exist for those things that weren't legal, like ice, for instance. That's probably still going to remain illegal, but the enhancing experiences from the other ones that people have taken perpetually for a long time, I believe that those would probably be the best option. Right, so alcohol, yeah, look, alcohol's its own problem. So is driving, so is walking next to a road, so is going swimming in Australia, so is walking barefoot in my backyard. That can all be the wrong decision you make. It's terrible. I'm just going to put this out there. This was once said by an advertising executive on national television, and I've agreed with him, even though I didn't know what the expression was. I've agreed with him my entire life, and that is, if drugs and alcohol did not exist, but I'm just going to say drugs because it's all the same thing. Alcohol is a drug. If drugs for fun did not exist at all, and that's all the cannabinoids as well, if none of those existed, we would spin around until we fell down. We would choose to spin around and feel the enjoyment of collapsing because of dizziness. That's what we would do. So this came from a very well educated person suggesting that in every society on the planet, every one of them, going back pre-civilization even, we've insisted on going to the edge of our existence by experiencing something, either a cactus flower, or I think it was the people in Borneo, they would chew on a root for a while and then until it was like crushed up, and put it into a blowpipe and blow it up their best friend's nose, in which they would quite quickly lose consciousness, and when they came to, the expression that I used, I hope they're not busy for about a month, but the effect on them would last a number of days in which they were incapable of normal function, but they enjoyed every minute of it. It was the thing they did. Yeah. So there's this mud carver mud, which is a root from a plant, which is prepared and consumed, and it has a very similar effect to really heavy drinking alcohol, and that's done in the Pacific Islands. Kava. It tastes awful, but it's quite an enjoyable experience. And those people who have ridden the snake, like Jim Morrison from the Doors on peyote, those people have found a new meaning to their lives. So just because you don't do it doesn't mean you should ban it for everybody else. I don't go to church, and I'm not up in arms with those who do. I'm not trying to say that it's corrupting the people's minds. I don't care. I don't care about them and what they do with their lives and how they want to see this planet and how they want to see their interaction with others and how they want others to perceive them. There's a whole bunch of information held within a society who prizes religion. It's as long as you don't have a severe opposition to other religions. It's the primary reason why I didn't join any of them, because of prior wars. If you can find me a religion that's never been to war, and don't you say that I have to hold on to those two things and have the little meter go backwards and forwards. I'm not joining Scientology. If there's a religion on the planet that's not been to war, I'd consider it, but that's a whole nother thing to talk about. I have a hard time with religion, for the most part, only because I did the example of going from, I think it was Sanskrit to what languages? I forget, Hebrew, I think, and then to Italian, and then German, and it came out the other end in English. I did direct translations of phrases coming from even Sumerian, a word for word. So I didn't understand at all what the context was of the original phrase, because I didn't live in that time. I can't imagine what it means, and I'll give you an example. With a George, what's his name? Not George Thorogood, the other one. Born in the USA. Someone correct me in the chat room and tell me who's saying that. So born in the USA, born in a dead man's town. So the context around that doesn't just mean you were simply born in a town that had a dead person in it. There's a meaning of the phrase which has context around a town that there's no life in that for you. There isn't any future for you in that town. There's nothing there for you. You'll end up moving out of that town. Yeah? So, born in a dead man's town, being translated so many times through these languages, who, when the reader was trying to attempt to translate between, thanks to Bruce Springsteen, thank you, me. I got a mini me in the chat room called me. So those persons who are doing the translation, I'm not going to say that phrase though. When you're translating it and you go born in a dead man's town, well, I didn't live in that language, and I don't really know what it means, because it doesn't mean what I know it to mean in my language in English. So, but if I'm doing it from Sanskrit to, who knows, right? Latin, I might not understand the context, but I'm going to write it word for word, because that's the best thing I can do. And then the next person says, oh, that word for word is really similar to an expression we use, but so I'll write it around that instead, because it'll make more sense to my readers. So they change the sentence just a little bit to make their context of an emotion to do with a phrasing, and it changes the context of the actual original text. When you get all the way out to English, it doesn't mean at all. I've actually done this in the past, and I've translated the entire song line for line through all of the different languages and come out the other end, and it makes no sense to anybody. Yeah, the words are there, but all the context is gone. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. The context is lost. But it was contextually a story with emotion and feeling towards different things. So, Born in the USA, it's very powerful. It talks about a lot of change. Hope you can read through the lyrics to understand what that means today when we read it. But that is the message, that's the take home, and that's lost. So people who are arguing word for word on any text that's been translated, your first question is, how many languages has this been translated through? And if they don't know, do your research, find it out. Then you know where you stand. Then you know that you need to learn what the context was of the original phrasing. Shakespeare, not everyone is really into Shakespeare. I had to do it at school. And when I say I had to do it, I wasn't in a mindset then to learn about it. I've subsequently learned all about it. And one of my friends did a doctorate on Shakespeare in a different language. Had to translate the entire thing. This is how I know so much about translation, is where I learned it from her doctorate. And she said that for the most part, word for word makes no sense when you translate it. And the only way to do it so that the new audience will understand it is by translating it in a context that makes sense for them. She said, however, the biggest difficulty with Shakespeare's writing was that it was said in today's Cockney accent, as close as that accent is today, was at a time in the past where it's so unique, and that the pronunciation of words was so unique that they had a rhyme through it. Today the rhyme is lost because we're trying to say it like the Queen's English, or it doesn't matter what language you say it in today. You can say it with an American accent from California surfing type, or educated Boston type. You could say however you like, but the rhyming, because of the word sound, is not the same anymore. What it meant was that when the person was reading out the Shakespeare lines in their regular accent at the time, the audience could predict what the rhyming word was going to be. Sort of like a song, where you can mispronounce a word just to make it rhyme, yeah? And that mispronunciation goes through your head as the actual word. So you can make a word rhyme that doesn't actually rhyme, but mispronounce it so that it does rhyme, and the person still hears the real word. I hope that makes sense. If I had an example right now, I know I've got 1,000 examples, but if I had one right now, I'd give it to you. And that is the basis around the Shakespearean text. So it was comical. It was done at the lowest brow depth. The people that were doing it had not the upper class perfect pronunciation, but they had the slang version, sort of like if you saw Mary Poppins, the way that the people are pronouncing the words then, and the way that you can say mistook rather than mistaken, just because it lined with book, and you still understand the context of the word. Well, that's what the original Shakespearean language had, and so it all fits together. That's the same problem that was faced by my friend doing a doctorate in turning it into a completely different language. And when I was talking to her about how the Sumerian texts it turned into, and how the Bible's text turned into, she said, "Oh, don't you talk to me about that." She said, "I was all over this," and then she informed me of the truth behind how the text and the context have changed, and it's changed so significantly that the entire message is lost. Entire message. So, look, I know I might jump around quite a bit, right? I took us a little deep there with the climate thing, and I've moved on and talked about the fires, and the fires are going to be really bad this summer. Absolutely hope that my house survives through it with all the materials and the position and the luck with the wind, and and hoping that my internet isn't cut off and that we can continue the show. I was going to be in January. Our show anniversary is in March. March 12th was our anniversary date, and we're coming up in 2 more shows' time. We're coming up to the 400th weekly show, which, when you do the math, and I think we missed one number. We've missed every Christmas. We missed 2 shows, so it's. I think we're in the 8th year, coming up to the 9th year, right, which is great. And we so love Freedom Slips and Revolution Radio for being here, for being a platform. We will forever be indebted to the late Nighthawk for his tireless effort and his want to have the message put out, and that message and the entirety of the radio station and all of his effort that he put into having this platform exist is fully respected, 100% respected. Now, we've, RIP, buddy. We know that the station is now controlled by a body of people, which is great, and we're looking forward to the stability of the station, which it seems to be completely stable, and the management is fantastic, thank you. But moving forward from this, I wonder if we can start to think about maybe some things that we could do. I know there's a lot of creative minds in the management, and maybe we could do some things. Oh, and by the way, Alec19, 8chan and 4chan are banned in this country entirely. We cannot and are not allowed to view either of those platforms. We can't see. There's another one. There's another few that we're not allowed to see any longer. In Australia, like, web filtering is a thing. This is, I think we're here at Internet version 2.0, where the governments, despite whatever we've asked for, have now started to put things in place to prevent us from going places we really want to go. There shouldn't be any reason why we can't get to qmap.pub, for instance, which is where 8chan, there's a collection of 8chan there, and that is actually a QNAP device. It's a storage device that's on, that has its own publishing, and it's pretty clever what they've done. So if you now can understand that the message that the governments are trying to, and for that religion for that matter, are either unwittingly or fully knowingly allowing and disallowing us to get a certain amount of information, we're under complete control. We're under as much control as they've ever wanted to have, and it's only going to get worse. There's I think it's called Right to Know, or Your Right to Know website, that in Australia, they're fighting to provide people the knowledge that the government has legislated against us finding out. Isn't that crazy? Like, at what point, at what year, I wonder, if this was 2001, where the governments went mad with power? Like, is it just been a gradual creep? Or are they all getting together and deciding that, gun control comes up every 5 minutes in the US, right? AR-15s or whatever they are. Can't have one of those apparently. Well, in Australia we haven't been able to have those since that shooting where where the most accurate shooting well beyond that of the capabilities of regular human. Certainly one that wasn't a gun advocate could achieve in headshots versus military headshots, deaths per shot. That's what we saw. I won't even say the name because we're demonetized as it is. Any more strikes on our YouTube channel, we're going to be gone. And I know now what they're able to do is transcribe the entire the videos that we put up, even though there's pretty much no images any longer. I had to take all the images out because they were getting upset with us. And if I put freedomslips.com for those people watching the YouTube, you know that I'm actually doing this live as we go. I've got a studio that I can change and do things that I want to do. I can even put up a test pattern, which will be pretty cool. Shiny side out test pattern. And just for those who want to know how to fold an aluminium foil reflector beanie, there's even one of those. And I've even got a whiteboard, so I can even draw a silly smiley face. And it's meant to be a silly smiley face with the tongue sticking out because they're doing complicated math problem. So that's the kind of tech I'm working with here. I got green screens and the whole business, but I don't do any more video because I've moved everything that I own pretty much into this room, and I've got almost no room at all to move around except for sit down and do the show. So all my green screens and everything all got taken down just while we're doing some moving around. All the junk goes into my room, then it gets dispersed or put into a big skip when they come every quarter. And I chuck all my old IT gear out. I threw like 3 cubic meters of IT gear away that I just been collecting over time. Old deployments where the stuff was useless, but I thought I could see some kind of use for it. I would just hoard this stuff, and oh man, it's crazy. I really could clean up everything and just get my sim racing gear in here and make a sim rig. Yeah, it's fun. So the chat room is alive tonight. Thank you very much. And so they're not allowing or disallowing anything, Dave. They are terrorizing people into choosing not to. The governments have always been mad with power, especially when people so willingly give up their power to them. The government is not our boss. They have fooled us into believing so. There's legislation there and bans, and if I type in 8chan and I try to go there and I'm going to click on it, this is not the Twitter, SMH, it says 3 hours ago, the notorious online forum 8chan that was disabled after 3 mass murders posted racist manifests on its has resurfaced over the weekend. Whoa, goodness. It's resurfaced back again. But my search that I've actually typed in doesn't produce the link to the website. Isn't that great? The first link is El Paso shooting lawsuits target 8chan message board. 8chan stages a comeback under a new name, Japanese pun, 8KUN. And then there's Wikipedia, SMH, then all the news stations talking about it, but not the actual link to the website. Isn't it great? So, look, if it resurfaces under a different name, good luck to it, to be honest. I'm not going to click on it. I know that there's some people in a lot of power. Hey, Johnny Quest, by the way. Do a little shout out. Oh, thanks. I'm not typing it in. I'm not doing it on my... I'm probably on a watch list as it is. I don't need any more of that dangerous stuff. I was once asked if I wanted to travel overseas by someone in government. And I said, well, maybe one day I'd like to go back to the States. And they just rolled their eyes and said, good luck with that. And clearly, I think they knew something about me that I'm unaware of. And I'm actually harmless, right? I'm not into doing anything at all except for I like motor cars. I like racing online. I don't like doing anything else. I drink coffee. Tea's all right. I don't prefer it. That's it. Yeah, I've got a radio show. We talk about stuff. we don't talk about things and condone things that make people do anything. So we share publicly available information, and I've just shared a discussion with one of my friends who did a doctorate on language. Surely I'm not a threat to anyone. But how long can you be hashtag bodies? Right? There was a really funny meme. Funniest meme of the week was it was I think a dead deer by the road, and the person had Clinton. They knew too much about Clinton. It was a dead deer. It was like roadkill. And they were holding up a sign with handwriting on it saying this, and it was hashtag bodies. That's it. So the hashtag body thing is a worldwide phenomenon. People are doing this everywhere, and it's clearly not just me. I'm not doing it. I'm not instigating it. I think it's one of those things that is now has its own life. It's got its own life form. It's like if you write a song, and after you play it, people are humming it audibly, and you can hear it, or they're whistling it, or when they sing it, or so when someone sings a couple of lines, their brain has to take it all the way through. It becomes its own thing. It's an entity on its own. And I think this is the power of the internet. As you can love it and hate it. It can be either positive for you or negative to you. There can be armchair experts who believe they know everything about everything, even just reading the title of something, and they believe they know the full depth of the conversation when they don't. Thus founding fathers ensuring gun rights. I think they really had something. I think gun rights are a thing. We didn't live with your history. We lived through a different history where Ned Kelly, look up Ned Kelly. He fought against the system, and despite that, we, except for farming, who were shooting kangaroos because the kangaroos were eating the feed for the sheep, except for those people, pretty much guns are something that we don't entertain as often. Open carry is the police only in this country. Actually, I said to a guy, he walked into his plain clothes, right? He walked into a Chinese restaurant, and he was in front of me, and I said, hey, when did we allow open carry? And he turned to me like I was just some crazy person. And he said, I'm a police officer, don't you know? And I said, no, you're plain clothes today. And I said, I was just really kidding, to be honest. I thought it would be funny. I thought you might find it funny. He didn't. And I was lucky that I wasn't handcuffed, kneed to the ground, and jailed for or maybe shot for no apparent reason. But I wasn't. I laughed it off, and I think he saw that maybe I truly was an idiot, and I should never say that to a police officer. I don't know. I thought, yeah, what the hell? It can't hurt. I'm only being fun. I didn't touch it or anything. What can you? What's wrong with the world where you can't joke about open carry with an officer of the law? I mean, really? I mean, I didn't have a gun. Oh well, look, we've come to pretty much the end of the show. This is Shiny Side Out, show number 398, with the hope that Meki will be back next week and he can divulge what it was that he was doing this week. I hope there's like half a show in that. I can hear the music must have started. Yeah, there's the music. All right. Look, stay tuned for Jer Bear's show. It's always a good show. It's After Hours with Jer Bear. And we'll see you next week for another Shiny Side Out. Take care, everyone, and have a good week.